Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first of, I'm sure, many to come in the Know series presented by our Business and Education and Resource Committee. We are so excited today to present to you a very, very important topic. It's super important for everybody to be in the know, especially as business owners, as websites are now one of our biggest assets as far as advertising and driving people to learn more about your business. So we're so excited today to have this presentation for you. Everybody that's on the call, if you could just mute yourself until the end of the presentation. We will be taking questions at the end. We'll have plenty of time. So if you have anything that's super urgent and you need to put it in the chat so you don't forget, by all means, you're more than welcome to do that. But we just ask that everybody else go on mute until the end of both of these gentlemen's presentations, and then we will answer questions at the end. So I would like to thank first and foremost our co-chair of the Education and Resource Committee, Maria Misko, for joining us today and helping to put this together. And we have two really amazing speakers for you. We have today Dante Mantovano, owner of Seven Circle Media, and James Henry Dunn from the law offices of James Henry Dunn, local attorney, here to present to you on website design and ADA accessibility. So without further ado, I am going to introduce James Henry Dunn, and he's going to kick off our presentation.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. This is a topic that has been really confronting all businesses. It first started out primarily in the hospitality industry, and now it's spilled over into other areas. So just real quickly, a bit about myself. I'm a local attorney. I live in Huntington Village. I'm a member of the chamber, and I have an office over in Melville. So I am primarily a transactional corporate attorney, over 90% of my work. And as you can see, I do everything from contracts to employment law, Department of Labor, licensing, permits, intellectual property, risk management, contract review, and the like. And I do most of my businesses in business startups and businesses that are growing beyond one unit. So throughout the day, I put up this QR code so that if you want to scan that, you can take a look at my website. And that is about it for the shameless self-promotion, I promise. So let's move forward. Now, is your website ADA compliant? Today, we're talking about the 10 steps to avoid joining the long list of businesses embroiled in costly ADA lawsuits. Now, countless lawsuits are being filed against businesses. Allegations of a violation of the Americans with Disability Act is what the argument is. And the people that are filing these are pointing out the failure to provide accessible websites and mobile apps. And when we talked about the title, I should have probably included that too, because now apps are ripe as well for possible litigation. So, and it's not, the ADA was always about access to a brick and mortar physical location. And when these lawsuits started coming up, there is no specific law. And that's what I'm going to try to clarify with you today and navigate with you today. The ADA does not have a specific law about website design. And so people are bringing these arguments to courts, and in most cases, they are victorious. So this is not about fear today. It's just to give you a healthy dose of fair warning, and with the hope of you addressing and remediating issues before anything arises with your own business. That's what's most important here to me. Unfortunately, the calls I get are people that have already been sued. So I've had multiple clients who have been named in a suit. Most of them, it's more about a negotiation. They're seeking a settlement. But some are actual litigation filed in federal court, can also be filed in state court as well. So what is essentially happening is that disabled user is unable to enjoy the full access and features of a business's website or social media. Whoops, sorry. So is your business ADA compliant? Number one, first and foremost, the size of your business does not matter. So even when we met as the education committee talking about this, and Kelly and Maria were there, a few people sitting in the room said, I work alone, I'm a consultant or something along those lines. And I said, well, it counts for you too. This is not just hospitality, like I said, it's service companies, consultants, retailers, any business that transacts business online or promotes a business online. Like I said, hospitality was originally the focus, and now it has spread. It's really any website with menus of products, payment, transaction functionality. Information websites are now a target too. So I'm going to read this out to you, and I put this in, I always hesitate to put in a long quote, but I want to read it out for the full effect. This is according to the American Bar Association. And, I underlined and bolded a few things here. The federal courts across the country have been flooded with over 8,000 digital accessibility lawsuits between 2017 and 2020. Now, some of you might be doing the math and say, okay, what are the odds for me, right? So before you start doing the math, let me point out a few other things. In 2020, over 85% of those federal filings occurred in 3 states: New York, Florida, and California. By the way, New York had the most by far of any state. In 2021 alone, over 4,000 suits were filed. Since 2018, website and mobile app accessibility lawsuits have made up 1/5 of all ADA lawsuits in federal court. These numbers do, and here's the kicker, and I put it in bold and I underlined it. Please note, these numbers do not include a substantial number of website and mobile app cases filed in state courts, and also demand letters. That's most of what I have seen with my clients. They just get a demand letter. They get a demand letter from a law firm that represents somebody who's blind. There's somebody in Great Neck, blind individual who works with a law firm and just sends out these letters. He just sits at home, goes to check out websites, and sends letters out, demand letters, and it's been quite lucrative for this individual. So the demand letters that are resolved prior to the filing of any lawsuit, and DOJ enforcement actions that resolve before the suit is filed. So those numbers above do not consider all of the other ways that businesses are being attacked. The number of threats of litigation, these demand letters that I talked about, made by complainants to businesses is, quite frankly, we can't count it. We don't know how to count it. It's impossible to count. New York, being one of the most plaintiff-friendly jurisdictions in all the United States, has proven to be the most fruitful ground. And New York federal courts have been inundated with website accessibility lawsuits. In recent years, New York has led the country with over 2,000 cases in 2021 alone. And again, these are just the ones that are filed, not the demand letters. Most are blind plaintiffs who make allegations about how they could not access the goods and services of a website. By comparison, the second most frequent state was California. They had 359 in that same. So clearly New York is where it's happening. And if you could take a look at this chart, what does it show? It shows that it's not declining in frequency and volume of lawsuits. It keeps on building and building and building since 2017 when these first started arising. So what is accessibility? Is your business's website accessible to people who are hearing or vision impaired? Okay. There's no current statutory or regulatory guidance on the matter. Legal precedent within various jurisdictions and a third-party institution set of guidelines has emerged as the standard. So in other words, the ADA doesn't have a set of rules about this. There aren't any. So what has happened is that courts are following a third-party private company's guidelines. And Dante is going to be talking about that in a little while. So the ADA, now the traditional law, the ADA was passed in 1990. George H.W. Bush was president at the time. The ADA prohibits discrimination against the disabled. And no individual shall be discriminated against on the basis of disability in the full and equal enjoyment of the goods, services, facilities, privileges, advantages, or accommodations of any place of public accommodation by any person who owns, leases, or leases to, or operates a place of public accommodation. Now, some of you might be watching this and saying, well, my website is not a place of public accommodation. Wouldn't that be a a restaurant or a retail store? Well, the courts have come to decide that your website is part of your place of public accommodation. And if you don't have a physical space, that website is the place of public accommodation. So the standards have changed or evolved with technology, I should say. And it is very important for you to realize that this applies to any business, okay? So a place of public accommodation is now being broadly interpreted. In other words, if a disabled individual cannot utilize your website, like everyone else, right? I'm sorry, I just went ahead of myself, so let's go back. If a disabled individual cannot utilize your website like everyone else, similar to their rights when accessing your physical location, it is being argued, and quite frequently successfully argued, that the appropriate accommodations have not been made. Title III of the ADA does not provide civil penalties for violations, but here's what happens, folks. You get sued, you have to defend yourself, you have to hire an attorney, you have to defend yourself in the matter, or you have to negotiate a settlement. That costs money. The fines are actually relatively small, but what ends up happening is the settlements and the costs to have representation are the biggest cost in these matters. So a website can be targeted by a potential litigant by simply surfing the web to see if screen reading technology is available. How many of you, you've seen websites where you click on a menu and a PDF pops up, right? When a PDF pops up, that is not readable. Screen reading software cannot read it, as I saw Dante nodding his head, right? So, if a PDF can't be read by screen reading software, guess what? That that disabled person cannot now enjoy the full and equal access of your website. So, again, your website is a place of public accommodation. So people with disabilities, there's more than 61 million people with disabilities in the United States. 1.3 million are legally blind. And these people are entitled to the full and equal enjoyment that a place of public accommodation provides to its customers. So moving on, is your menu readable with screen reading software? Is your online ordering system compliant with current WCAG standards? Can a disabled person make a reservation or purchase like anyone else? As I pointed out, hospitality was the focus, but now it's shifting. Plaintiffs and law firms are pursuing businesses across all industries with thousands of lawsuits and demand letters. Domino's, believe it or not, was the precedent-setting case, and Domino's lost their argument because they said, hey, we're a pizzeria. People have access to our pizzeria. They don't need access to our menus. And they lost their argument. And that has been the precedent that has been relied on in most of these cases. And that was in 2019. And the Supreme Court actually rejected Domino's argument. So that's worth noting. A couple more points. Drive-by lawsuits. That was the famous, a handicapped or disabled person could literally drive by a business, see that there was no accessibility for a wheelchair, for example, and they could file a lawsuit without even getting out of their vehicle. Now we have surf-by lawsuits. The disabled can simply surf the web, find a website that they can't fully enjoy, and they can file a lawsuit. More than 93% of website accessibility cases filed were settled in 2018. And here's the one I think you'll all find a little shocking, but just 10 law firms, let me say that again, just 10 law firms in the United States account for 82% of these lawsuits. So they're clearly what I would say are, I guess the word would be predatory. And they're out there seeking demand. So I will share this link with you all. This is actually a law firm out in California. They've put together this amazing list. They list the law firms that are doing this. Okay, so I'm not here to really, I don't want to scare you, but here's what they do. I'll click on this one with no knowledge of them directly. But here's this law firm, and here is their argument. Here is their filing that they file in federal court. And here's the entire thing. And you can scroll through it at your leisure. But all they do is copy and paste it put in the name of a client, of a client who can't access the name of a business, and they file it in federal court. And it is literally copy and paste, insert name of the defendant and the plaintiff, and you file it in court, you pay the filing fee, and there you have litigation ready to go. And again, it's just these small number of websites that are doing all of this. So the part of today, it's not as necessarily to scare you, it's just to show you, to give you a dose of reality and to show you how easy it is for all this to happen. So let me just get through a few more points and then we'll pass it on to Dante. Is your website accessible? How are you going to figure this out? There's no regulatory guidance, right? So here's what you need to know. No individual shall be discriminated against on the basis of disability and the full and equal enjoyment of goods, services, facilities, privileges, advantages, accommodations of any place of public accommodation, right? We covered that. So what is the standard? It is the WCAG standard, all right? The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines standard. They're recently, not recently, Dante can confirm for me, they were updated relatively recently, I will say. The WCAG is a private entity, and this is what the courts rely on. So website accessibility evaluation tools are available. And there's software out there that you can use to run. I'm going to show you some of them. All right. And here are the 10 steps that you can take. This is what I promised you, the 10 steps to avoid liability. You have to have a website that is perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust for the disabled. So what does that mean? Perceivable, alt text. You know, when you're all building something on your website, I uploaded to LinkedIn today, I uploaded a promotion. And when I uploaded the image, it said, type in the alt text. And you can bet I provided a nice, thorough alternative text so that that person who is blind with screen reading software, their software will read out that text to them, even though they cannot enjoy the picture itself. Does that make sense? So that's why that's there. Colors. You have to have colors that are bright, sharp, with significant contrast. Subtitles. If you have a video, you should have subtitles. All right. Yeah, I know we can, when we upload this video, we can actually have subtitles added if we so chose, right? So if you don't have alt text, the screen reading software can put out some pretty inappropriate interpretations of photos. So with alt text, the screen reading software will be literal. It will follow what it is you write as the alternative text to enable that person with a disability to understand and fully access the website. Keyboard accessibility, time limits that can be adjustable, flashing content, all right? There must be how some websites will sometimes have something flashing. Well, is the screen reading software able to interpret that? And is it slowed down enough so that the screen reading software can interpret that? So you have to worry about speed. You also have to worry about those that are disabled with epilepsy. All right. So just a couple more points, I promise. The language of each page can be determined by the software. It should be predictable in the way it's laid out. Right. And there should be input assistance and a robust compatibility with assistive technologies. So it must be able to be utilized with the softwares that are out there. All right, here's my punchline. Is there any hope for you? The answer is yes. All right, there are cases that have shown recently, Apple, believe it or not, and Kroger, the stores, were successful in their arguments that they had already, and please, ladies and gentlemen, the important note is here, they had already begun to make changes to their website. Be proactive. These two businesses won their arguments because they were able to demonstrate that they were making the changes. Unfortunately, this was not in the New York District Court. So, but the fact is, this is precedent that can be used. But again, not in the New York, it was actually in the second judicial district, as I remember. So there are no guarantees that just because you're proactive, you can avoid this. However, my point to you today is do the right thing, get your website updated so that this does not happen to you. My final thoughts, even if your website, when designed, was in compliance, it may not be up to date. There's newer software enabling the disabled to seamlessly access it, or there needs to be the ability for that disabled person to seamlessly access your site. You need to do constant revisions. You need to have a professional like Dante take a look at your site. You need to have an audit. And sorry, Dante, I keep on mentioning you, but I put a little shameless plug in there for you. So, you can work with a reputable company, all right, to do a review. I can do a review with you, all right, from the legal side. And then I can work with Dante on how to, I apologize about the dog in the background. But you have to work with a reputable company, and you should work with an attorney, and hopefully that attorney and that company can work together to make sure you're in compliance. You need to take prompt steps to make sure you're accessible. Final thoughts, again, consider also adding an accessibility statement to your website, and be sure to have an attorney draft one for you. Now, there are 2 websites. You can take a look at these at your leisure. They will provide software that can scan your site. And just let me, one more thing. I have my legal disclaimer, and I'm going to show you one more thing. And then Dante, I'll pass it on to you. This is a website accessibility statement. I wrote this. I'm, as you can see here, I'm indicating copyright. So please respect that. I've written this for my clients. And basically, even though it's not part of the WCAG standards, I've written a statement that when you go onto their site, there's a website ADA you've seen this now. You see a little ADA disability icon on websites. You click on that, and this shows you, this provides to that disabled person a statement that basically says, we're doing everything we can. We're using the software to be as compliant as possible. And I blocked out my client's names here, but we will continue to do that as much as possible, right? And if you have any issue, you can call us. We'll read the website to you, all right? We'll reply to you. We'll print out the website. We'll send it to you. It's basically just trying to say we're doing everything we possibly can. All right. And even though this is not necessarily legally going to, pull you out of hot water, yeah, I think it's a nice way to demonstrate that your business is respectful of the disabled, and that you're hoping, to do the very best you can to be in compliance. So you can go to these websites at your leisure. There's Accessibility and Equal Web. All right. And then my legal disclaimer, I am not your attorney. So please understand that this was not an exhaustive discussion. I would be happy to provide anybody with the information that they need, and would be happy to work with you on ways to move forward in your businesses, not just on the ADA and website compliance, but really just on any business related matter. So please feel free to contact me. I'd be glad to help. So now we're going to pass it off to Dante, Mr. Mantovano, for best practices and design tips. So Dante, I give it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Thank
nice
you.
To meet everybody. Dante here with Seven Circle Media. We specialize in web design. We're also partnered with a few different web development companies locally and some larger corporations such as Wix, Square, Shopify, and WordPress. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share a few different examples of ADA compliance to touch on some of the items James touched on, and open it up for questions from there. So I'm just going to share my screen here.
Dante, your audio. There we go.
Sorry about that. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples here. I have 10 different examples and what you can do on your website or alternative options from a web development perspective as well. So first example here is proper contrast. Pretty straightforward. I mean, when you look at this, it seems like it'd be common sense when kind of just designing, but it's something to keep in mind when putting text on an image, making it easy to read versus hard to read. So you have obviously your first example here, hard to read. So you can't really even see that. So putting some type of background on the text, just to make it very simple. Another option is to make the image more transparent. So if you put a black background on something like this, you can make it easier to read that white text there. And I'm sure a lot of you have probably seen the colorblind test, making sure that you're using colors not to just contrast, but make sure that you're keeping in mind that someone who might be colorblind can't read or see differences within two different colors that might be the same shade. This is an interesting one because it's something that tends to not pop up, or maybe you might not think about it when creating a form, but when creating a form, you always want to clearly label the form fields as opposed to doing something where they're inside or the labels are inside each form field or each box on the form. So something to keep in mind when creating those forms. This is usually a pretty straightforward option when designing websites. You can set this up pretty easily, and I'll go over a few examples on how you can do that as well. Providing feedback. Normally, this is something that most forms and most websites have built in natively, and you'll be able to see an error or if something is not formatted correctly in a form when completing it in a field, it will show you the required fields needed. Normally that's natively done, not something to worry about, just something to keep in mind. This is another big thing with accessibility, but mouse navigation and keyboard navigation for someone who might not be able to use a mouse or use a keyboard alternatively, something to keep in mind, maybe the tab key. Again, this is something that's pretty native, can be used on most web development platforms. Moving on to navigation, just having consistent navigation so that websites can be navigated pretty easily. Something that's pretty native with a lot of different platforms. We work a lot with something called Wix. I'll get into that a little bit, but most navigation is built into the website. Not something to worry about. Now, headings and spacing, this is something that can be created on the back end of your website. In a lot of cases, it's something you have to keep in mind, and I can get into an example once we move forward here. But something to keep in mind just for navigating through headings and spacing overall. Responsiveness, or designing for various devices, views, and screens. So a responsive website is a website that can be viewed on any type of screen, monitor, or smartphone. So ensuring that your website is responsive is not only important from an ADA perspective, but also from an SEO perspective, because that's something Google checks on, and that's something that will help you rank higher on Google as well. I know SEO is a big thing with a lot of our clients, but it's something to keep in mind when designing your website, that it's not only available on desktop and it works properly on desktop, but that it's also available and works properly on mobile phones, smartphones, and tablets as well. Offering alternatives for consuming media. So again, that goes along with transcriptions or alt text, as James had mentioned. Something important to keep in mind also from an SEO perspective. So this is something that can help you rank higher for your website, ensuring that you're putting alternative text on images, just like James mentioned in his LinkedIn example. That's definitely something to keep in mind as well. And here's another big one. It's, for this example, giving users control, but for a carousel, if you have like a scrolling carousel on your hero section on your home page, you want to make sure that it's very clear that you can move back and forth between those images or pause those images as well. Something to keep in mind. Now, I understand these are, a few different things that maybe you're not going to be able to remember, or you're just going to have to keep in mind. And even for me as a web developer, it's something that I have to be aware of on a pretty regular basis. So the reason we use a platform called Wix is because Wix has a accessibility wizard, and I'm going to share my screen here.
Dante, you muted again.
Whoops. So just to give you guys kind of a breakdown of how Wix's accessibility wizard works, it is WCAG 2.0 set up or has global standards. So Wix already has that built into their wizard. This is all automated. It's not something that you have to have prior knowledge of. You just follow along the steps, and I'm going to get into that here. But Wix is definitely a great option if you're thinking about building a website or considering it. It has a lot of drag and drop features, point and click, very easy to use. And like I said, you have this accessibility wizard. So some of those examples I gave, you don't really necessarily have to keep in mind, as well as the WCAG 2.0. So I'm going to share my screen and show you guys a live example of how the accessibility wizard works inside of Wix. All right, so this is a local client of ours. They've been in business for quite a few years. It's the Premium Shopping Guide, and we helped them recently redesign their website, and we are now going through the steps to ensure that it is ADA compliant. And as you can see on the right-hand side, we have a few different options with the Wix Accessibility Wizard to walk through headings, color contrast, and it's all picked up automatically through the wizard inside of the Wix editor. So it's not something that we have to know or keep in mind of certain compliance issues. It's something that can be done automatically right through Wix, and it will walk you through it. As long as you're following the wizard, you can apply the different changes and just go through the steps on the right-hand side of the editor, and really as simple as point and click. So very easy to use, definitely a great option. I do know there are a few different WordPress plugins as well, but I tend to point a lot of our clients to Wix just because of that accessibility wizard, point and click editor. It's easy for our clients to edit the sites, work through text changes, simple adding periods at the end of sentences, making updates to the site, even adding products for e-commerce companies. So definitely a really great option. If anyone's interested in building their site on Wix or has questions about other platforms, definitely always feel free to reach out, and that's something we can help with. But I'll open up the floor for some questions between James and I, and we can take things from here.
Do I get to ask a question?
Absolutely.
Of course.
The word responsive, you had said, the website that there needs to be responsiveness. Can you further sort of describe that or tell us what that really means? Because it's a little vague.
Absolutely. So responsive is so that a site can be viewable not only on a desktop version or on your computer, but as well as your smartphone or your mobile phone. So you can pull up the site, things don't look out of whack. It's easy to use navigation, easy to scroll the site. Everything looks fine on mobile as well as desktop and tablets too.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
So I use Square for my website designing and everything. How would you recommend making that ADA accessible?
So Square Online is actually one of our partners as well. They do not have an accessibility wizard, but it's something to keep in mind when designing the site. It's pretty straightforward. The templates are pretty simple on the Square side. I tend to refer a lot of our Square clients that want to build something out that's a little bit more complicated to a Wix or Shopify. But understanding that having all of your inventory in one place, that might not be an option. So Square is great in terms of setting up a simple site. I would say just make sure you're keeping those ADA compliant examples I shared as an option, and just go through that WCAG 2.0 breakdown. That's definitely going to be important. We can definitely share that link and pass that along afterwards, but definitely something to keep in mind on that side.
Sabrina, let me share with you. You can try this website. It's called Equal Web. Okay. And can you all see that?
Mhm.
Okay, so Equal Web, you can run your site through it. I believe it says free trial, but you should be running it through periodically. And it's going to give you a report. And it's going to let you know where the shortcomings are. So that's one of them. I'll say it again, Equal Web. And then the other that I've noticed is Accessibly. And again, free trial, but you should be using them periodically. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And again, reach out to us if you find problems. And Dante, I'm sorry, did Eve have a question?
You did your.
No, I'm good. Thank
Yeah, okay.
Just wanted to pop in, make sure I'm not sleeping.
Wake up.
Well, you say Wix. I happen to use iPage. And so I don't believe, at least in the templates I'm using, I don't think that's available to me. So I just drop it into those sites, and that's how I check it.
Absolutely, that's a great option.
But are there other companies that you recommend? GoDaddy and all them. I mean, there's so many names out there.
WordPress is a great backup solution. It also has a lot of ADA compliant plugins. So that's a great option. And then Shopify as well.
Okay.
Now, I have a quick question for you both, I guess. Do you see the trends of this? Like, do you think there will be actual restrictions and some sort of guidance that comes out in the future? I know you said that there's not currently an actual, basis for this, but is this something that you can see transforming in the future, and will it be, outside of, visual and hearing, which seem to be the two most dynamic? Do you see this coming with the future as websites evolve, as bots and avatars and things expand? How do you see that changing this realm?
Dante, I'll pass on to you, but I'll say the legal side. Right now, like the New York Restaurant Association, the National Restaurant Association, NISHTA, which is the Hospitality and Tourism Alliance in New York, and the Hotel Association across the United States, they're all fighting to get legislation passed and lobbying to get legislation passed, so that it's, hey, if they're sticking up for their industry, it's going to benefit other businesses, in other industries, right? So some of the industry and they're sticking it up for their industry because they were the hit first, right? So, and I didn't mention to you, but there were, PF Chang's, Outback, Olive Garden, Del Frisco's, Capital Grill, they were all hammered with these lawsuits, and they paid out big. So now you're seeing that, like I said, the National Restaurant Association, I know the New York, and then you're seeing other associations in that industry trying to lobby their politicians. So hopefully this won't be a problem, and that, there'll be, we'll still have these tools to make them, because let's face it, we should be accessible to everybody at all times,
yeah.
right? But some of these are seemingly, and I say seemingly, I say that with caution, or some of these are seemingly frivolous, or, they're not showing that they were actually, because some of the courts have said, well, you live 40 miles from that restaurant, when were you going to go there? And some of those arguments have won, where, you don't show any need or desperate need that you were going there or you had any plan of going there whatsoever. So then the question becomes, is that fair? Is it fair to the restaurants to have to just, somebody in another state can go to my website and say that they can't access it?
Yeah.
I doubt I'm delivering to another state or 40 miles away. Product.
Very true.
So I don't know if I'm answering you, but I think I'm getting at something that's important.
Yeah.
You have to be able to show that you truly are going to be damaged by this and that you truly didn't have access. And hopefully we get there where, okay, if it is a legitimate complaint, good, then it should be enforced. But we need to find some parameters around what is legitimate and what is somebody just going for a cash grab, which is what has happened.
Yeah. And I think I asked that because I think of all the people, this topic came up because you mentioned it at one of our committee meetings. And I think all of us, it's the education on the fact that this is something that is, people can be at risk for. It's so important to educate people. So I'm so excited now that both of you did an amazing job presenting us with really, really informative pieces that we can now take and share with our business owners and our business community as a whole, that they can now, utilize these websites where they can put their website in to make sure that they're in compliance. That they're not having both you, Dante, and James, those resources is tremendous. So I really want to say a big thank you to both of you for presenting today. This was phenomenal.
Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Are there any other questions at this time? All right.
All
Well,
right.
thank you everybody for joining us today. Again, keep a lookout for
Yes.
our next In the Know series. If there's a
Can you hear
topic
me?
that you feel like, yep. Oh, sorry.
Richard, yes, we
Go
can
ahead,
hear
Rich.
you.
Hi, how you doing? Yeah, the question I have is, I couldn't unmute fast enough, is in order to get my website, looked at, should it go to an attorney first, like you, James, or to Dante first?
Well,
Or do I need both to evaluate it?
there, like I've mentioned before, and it's going to seem like I'm not a good salesman for myself, but there are some free tools out there, that you can play around with. And then if you get a report back that, gives you concern, then you can talk with us. I'll show it again. There's Accessibee right here. All right. And you have a free trial. You can run your website through this. And there's Equal Web. And it's worth noting that, these are third parties. I don't make any warranties or guarantees as to their reliability, but they are tools for you to get a good sense of where you're at. I can promise you, and this is Richard, this is going to sound a little pessimistic to me, but I can promise you that there's something on your site that isn't,
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. And that's nothing towards you. We don't know each other. It's just that every one of these I look at, I see an issue. And I'm not going to lie, at my website, when I first became aware of this, I'm like, wait a minute, and so I went, because I certainly have to be an example, right? If somebody's going to contact me. So everyone has something, and it's really like the alt text one jumps out at me, but Dante brought up so much more, and those color contrasts, and the responsiveness of the site across various platforms. Those
I'm
things.
saying, could I just get in touch with Dante and say, hey, can you look at my site and tell me what you think and what's involved to get it compliant?
Absolutely. I can even run it through. We can take a look together, quick screen share, and take it from there.
Okay. What's your contact info? I don't believe I have that. Or is that going to be listed later on?
It'll be listed, but if you just Google 7 Circle Media, all spelled out,
7 Circle Media. Okay, got it.
you'll get right to our site.
Got it.
And hopefully,
Happy
you
to
don't,
work with.
hopefully you don't hear from anybody about a complaint where you have to contact me.
Well, like you said, it's better to be proactive, so I'd like to be.
Absolutely. And that's what this is all about. I wasn't doing it out of fear, instill fear. I was doing it out of just, hey, why not do it now so you avoid problems later?
Yeah, in the last couple of months, there was a large article in the paper about it.
And it's been going on since 2017, but it's really kicked up in the last couple of years.
Just what we need.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have enough problems,
And
things
but
to worry about.
there are law firms out there that this is all they do. This is.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, it's
you know,
crazy.
it's scary. But you know what? I've had people say to me, well, that's, they say bad things about those firms. I'm like, but they're not doing any, if there's a legitimate problem with the website, how can you sit there and,
You're not doing anything
you know,
wrong, yeah.
absolutely.
Out of curiosity, if you were to, if let's say someone, was served with a lawsuit and they said, okay, I'm going to just take my site down, is that a defense that makes it go away?
No, because it's happened. That person has experienced the problem, right? So the best thing you can do, no matter what, I should have said this, and I might have skipped it. The best thing you should do, even if you have a complaint against you, is fix it, right? It's not a bad thing to go ahead right away and start fixing.
So if you have a complaint and you go ahead and say, okay, I'll fix it, does that then make
No,
any
no,
damages disappear?
It could help, but it could be compelling depending on the court it's filed in. My experience is that I had a client all the way from California contact me. It was a clothing store in Los Angeles, because I popped up because I've written articles on this, and she called me. And I just said, look, this is copied and pasted. I found her exact complaint online from one of those firms. And I was like, here's this complaint without your name on it that I found on that law firm's website. Her jaw, we were on Zoom. She was so disgusted. But I was like, look, here's what you need to do. You need to either A, fight back, which I don't recommend at this point, because you were in the wrong. So just find out an equitable resolution, negotiate some type of fair resolution. And that's what most of these people are looking for. They're just looking for some money.
Thank you.
All right, thank you,
Any,
appreciate it.
Yeah.
You're
Are there
welcome.
any other additional comments, questions, concerns?
No.
All right.
Thank
Well,
you all.
Yeah, thank you guys again. And again, we did record this today, so we will be sharing it out. And I really appreciate you both taking the time, Dante and James, to present this information. It was extremely informative, and I know that a lot of people will be looking to this video for guidance and hopefully trusting you and reaching out to you in the future so that we can help navigate this all together. So thank you so much, everyone, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.